On our quest to find the ultimate language learning app, we've all probably heard of apps like Duolingo and Babbel. But there's one app, over 3,000 times less known than Duolingo, that will, in just about 10 hours, teach you the basics of any language. And everyone who recommended it to have been really shocked by its effectiveness, yet no one seems to have heard of it. So let me introduce you to Language Transfer, a simple, yet extremely effective, 100% free app focused on helping you understand the structure and logic behind languages. It took me from pretty much not knowing any Spanish at all, to in just a month or two be able to hold short conversations in the language. And if you learn from my mistakes, I think your results could be even better than that. Before finding Language Transfer, my idea of language learning was pretty much just listening to some boring teacher in school tell me all these grammatical rules and words that aren't even used in real conversation, just to have me forget about them after the school year ended. I mean, I took 2 years of Spanish back in middle school, yet I could barely remember how to say my own name in the language a few years later. This, however, all changed when I discovered Language Transfer, and realized that there are systems and ways of learning that are way more effective than traditional study. And I think the app works best if you're still a beginner in a language, wanting to learn the basics of it pretty quickly. The way that it works is that it's comprised of audio courses, with short lessons around 10 minutes each, and the courses ranging from around 5 to 30 hours per course, depending on the language. The courses are structured in a way that equips you with frameworks, patterns, and ways of thinking about the language that helps you understand and memorize it way better than just looking at the words until they stick in your head. And some examples of this are how you learn that you can translate most English words ending in ly directly into Spanish by just adding ment onto the end. And the same thing can be done with English words ending in ty by adding dad onto the end. This is obviously extremely effective, as within the first dozen or so hours of learning a language, you now have built up a base of vocabulary containing hundreds or even thousands of words, without having to memorize anything really. One big disadvantage of this app, however, is that it only supports the 9 languages shown on screen right now, as of the time of recording at least. But I think that even if your language isn't supported currently, you can still learn a lot of things by watching this video, and maybe you decide to learn another language that is supported in the future. Language transfer courses will very quickly give you a basic understanding of the language, and they're very easy to consume on the go as well. I personally knocked out multiple of these every single day while just walking to and from places. So that means that you can spend a lot more time doing other things as well, or studying a language in different ways. So this all sounds great, right? It's free, it teaches you stuff very quickly, and you barely even have to spend any time on it. But that doesn't mean it's the only thing you should do. When I started learning Spanish, like I said, got pretty good results in the beginning. But after a while, when I wasn't quite where I wanted to be, I made a critical mistake of repeating the course, thinking that's what's going to get me to the next level. But that's a fatal flaw in this type of approach to language learning, which is that it's not made to get you fluent. Language transfer and other logic and thinking-based approaches are really good at getting you to maybe an upper beginner level, or if you're lucky, a lower intermediate level. But once you get here, you're gonna need another tool to get the job done to get you over this hump into fluency. And that's where you gotta start including some more comprehensible input into your learning. This means basically watching, listening to, or reading things in the language without any subtitles. Just learning the structure behind the language and the vocabulary and grammar will have you end up with an extremely unnatural result, which isn't really a bad thing in the beginning, as that's not your final form, if you will. But to actually fix this problem in the long term, you're going to want to expose yourself to a lot of natural input of the language, to sort of fill up your brain with how the language is actually supposed to sound in real life, to counteract this whole thinking heavy approach that you started out with. Many people falsely believe that if something worked for them when they were new to language learning, it's going to keep working no matter how advanced they get. But that's sort of like using a chess move that you tricked your friends with back in high school, now in the World Championships. All I can say to that is, good luck. The reality of things is that they evolve. So to make sure you keep making progress with time, you can't let your method stay stagnant. Which takes us to how to most effectively use the app for the best possible results. The first thing you must understand is that no one has or ever will think themselves to fluency. But because thinking is effective in the beginning stages of learning a language, that means that you cannot solely rely on that continuing to be effective months or even years down the line. And the solution to this is to include a mix of inductive and deductive learning approaches. A deductive approach would be explicitly learning how things work and memorizing the rules of a language to help you understand it. While inductive learning would mean that you're looking at the language itself, and from there letting your brain subconsciously teach you these rules without even necessarily being consciously aware of them. An example of a deductive approach to learning would be stuff similar to what you've done in school, where you for example sit down and really try to understand the difference between two verb tenses by just looking at explanations of them on a paper, then repeating stuff and trying to look over them again and again until they really stick in your head. And the inductive approach would be observing someone using the language and also using two different versions of the past tense to explain stuff that they have done. But then from the examples and from the things that they did, then understanding that you use one in one scenario and one in the other, without necessarily knowing the exact differences between the two, but just subconsciously understanding it. Pretty much how we know the difference between the past tenses in our native languages. Clearly one of these is a lot more natural, but I think a good case to include some deductive learning into your approach as well is because it sort of helps you build this base understanding of the language, even if it is conscious and sort of unnatural in the beginning, that then helps you understand the content that you're going to be consuming, and from then consuming a lot of that content, you will sort of override this thinking, logic heavy part of your brain that you originally used to learn the language. So you sort of get the best of both worlds. Because if all you focus on doing in the beginning is learning the language via memorization and thinking, then it's going to be extremely hard to sort of unplug that part of your brain when it's time to use the language naturally, let's say in a conversation or when you want to watch a movie without having to think about what every single word means. Now, it definitely is possible to sort of induce, if you will, your way to fluency without even thinking at all. That is how we did it in our native languages. But I believe that's going to take a lot more time than if you also leverage some of your thinking capabilities as an adult human being in comparison to a child, and get a base understanding, like I said, for the language in the beginning, to then help you understand the content that you're consuming. And I don't think that the negative of this will be very big, since, like I said, you probably will sort of override that from the hundreds or hopefully thousands of hours of natural input that you will be consuming later down the line. With this being said, I think using language transfer if you're a beginner in any language is a very good choice, and if I were to start learning any of the languages that's supported by language transfer, I would 100% start with language transfer, and then move on to other methods when I get more advanced. But I think that the way language transfer teaches you words and grammar is extremely effective because it actually teaches you useful vocabulary that's used in day-to-day life, unlike some other apps. But you're also going to make sure that after a while, after maybe completing the course once or twice, that you then find ways to learn where you can just sit back and try to understand what things mean without necessarily focusing on why they mean what they mean. And this could be via watching YouTube videos or TV shows or movies in the language. So if you want to find out the way to do this in the most effective way possible, then watch the video on the screen right now. And I'll see you guys there.